Alrighty. And get myself set up here. If you're just joining, welcome in. I'll be getting started in just a couple of minutes as people start joining. Alrighty. Hey, Monique. Good to see you. Katerina from Austria. Nice. From Vienna. Well, it's nice to see you guys. I'd love to hear where you're coming from. If you want to tell us where you're coming from in the comments section, be great to connect. Orla says that she's coming from Long Island. Welcome in. Cassidy from the Grateful Dead, named from the Grateful Dead. Ready from Czech Republic. Monique says, my phone addiction pays off when I can make these lives. I hope you and your family had a nice Christmas. It wasn't too crazy. Everyone, probably a majority of the folks that are here today are overloaded on sugar and carbs. This will not help you burn any of them off. Not that you need to, but you'll be you'll have to probably walk the dog for that today if you've got one. Tyler, Texas, Idaho, Ontario, wow, South Africa, Sacramento, New York City, Ann Arbor, Michigan. Wow, so awesome. Sherry, will you be taking birth chart data? Yeah, I will, but the order of events today will be, first, I'll be doing a breakdown of the major transits for January. We're going to be looking at this as a January overview, and then I will open up for some Q&A and live readings. So it'll be a little bit before I get there, but if you stick around, I'll be doing that. From Kimberly from Austin, Texas. Cassidy says you're from New York City. That's awesome. I think maybe you said that last time. I don't remember, but either way, welcome in. So glad you're here. Asheville, you're in a plane. That's awesome. Streaming live on up in the air somewhere. Hi from still dreary Minneapolis. Isn't that the truth, Whitney? It's just kind of like Ashley and I were looking around yesterday and like, you know, like, we need some, I need some snow here. Cassidy says you overloaded on Mexican cookies your mom made. That sounds awesome. You got to give yourself one day a year, you know. From Toronto, from Germany, Kirsten from the New Year One program. Oh, awesome. I hope you're enjoying it. We'll be getting back to classes after the new year again. We're on a little bit of a break right now. Salt Lake City. Amazing. Well, it's so nice to see where you guys are coming in from. I'm going to wait till we get a little bit closer to about 100 people live. When we get near that number, I usually do my little countdown and then we'll start officially. But again, today, if you're coming in live and wondering what we're up to, I am going to start by doing a live breakdown of the major astrology transits of January 2024. And then I'll be taking Q&A and doing some live readings. So the live reading and Q&A portion will come after I look at the transits for January. From Spain and Indiana, amazing. And let's see, coming in, I don't know how to pronounce this, Santa, I have no idea how to pronounce that, Emily, but I do know Emily from classes. And Claudia from South Los Angeles, thanks for being here. Alabama. And Jennifer says, loved your Christmas Day Venus trine Neptune episode. Yeah, and we had a good jam session. It was really fun. Hello from Houston. Hello from Seattle. It's really, as always, I love seeing where you guys are coming from, and it, it's really crazy when I see people from all over the world. It really is sort of like, how did this happen? Dorianne from Frederick, Maryland, who I found out recently that Dorianne was at an event back in, I want to say, like 2011 or 12, that Ashley and I went to in DC. It was like this water blessing event, and she was at that event, the same one that Ashley and I were at, like, I don't know, 12 years. It was just kind of crazy that you never know how you're connected to people. I thought that was pretty neat. Michelle from Scotland, you are how this happened. Now that's really nice of you. Thank you. From South Louisiana, first year studying with you. Awesome. Nice. Hope you're enjoying the program. And yeah, we just got started with that new program in November, and we're on a little bit of a break right now. So I'm excited. It's nice to have a little break, like just from clients and teaching at the moment. So content and managing the last days of the Kickstarter is really all I have in front of me this week. So I have a little bit more time with the family, which is really nice, and get a little bit of time to prep and think about the series I want to do for next year. And for me, that always comes when I have downtime. Like, I can't come up with creative ideas for the channel unless I have some downtime. So sometimes people will, like, I got a message yesterday and someone was like, why don't you ever take a break? And I was like, anytime I want a break, for the most part, I record my content in advance so that you guys still have content and I get a break. So I like making sure that the content is really consistent for the most part. Occasionally I take a week off. So there'll probably be, like, a few times a year you might see me take a little bit of a break. But for the most part, when I want to take a break, I just record content in advance and then give myself that space. That's how that works. What's the best advice for Virgo risings right now? Let go of control. No. I'm just playing. I don't know. We'll have to come around to that as we look at some of the horoscopes for January, which I'll be doing with Alex later this week. Oh, that's fun. Diana says, you're from Alberta, from the same little hometown as Ren Butler and his brother's BFFs with my uncles. Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah. Okay, amazing. Well, we are close to 100 people, so I'm going to start the countdown and we will get going. Here we go. All right. Well, officially welcome in, everybody. This is Adam Ellenboss from Nightlight Astrology. Today, I'm coming live to help promote the Kickstarter in the final days. We are down to just about 5 days left to go in our 10th annual Kickstarter campaign. We still have a ways to go, so I'm here banging the drum, trying to rally support for our channel and my staff. I'll be doing that today and telling you more about how you can support the Kickstarter. But the content for the day will be the Astrology of January 2024, followed by an open Q&A and live reading session. Now, depending on how long it takes me to get through the Astrology of January, that will depend on sort of how much time we have for Q&A and some live readings. But because I want to make sure that I don't completely drain myself. So I'll just kind of keep an eye on how I'm feeling in terms of how long we go today. But yeah, that's the goal for today. So it's been really nice to see where you're all coming from. It's a full moon today, by the way. If you want to check out the astrology of our full moon, my regular daily content on the YouTube channel today is a breakdown of the full moon in Cancer, which is happening as the sun is moving into a trine with Jupiter, and Jupiter is stationing to turn direct. Jupiter has a ton of influence over a lot of planets right now. So the fact that this is a trigger moment at the full moon for Jupiter turning direct is a very significant part of the meaning of the full moon. So I highly recommend that you take some time today, if you're interested to learn more about our full moon, and check that video out that dropped earlier, just a couple hours ago. Today, we are looking forward at January, and I'm going to walk you guys through the major transits of the month. Before I do that, as always, you guys know that around this time of the year, one of the reasons that I am on live stream is to promote the final days of my annual Kickstarter campaign. So as of right now, we are at, let's see, hold on, let me get my handy little banners up here. So we're trying to reach 1,777 backers supporting this channel in 2024. As of the time that I am recording this, let me adjust my number here a little bit. We're at 1,029 backers that we have received support from, leaving us with a total of 748 that are still needed by New Year's Eve. If you would like to support the Kickstarter, there are a couple of basic ways that you can make your way over there. After this live stream has posted, you'll find the link pinned to the top of the comment section and in the description of the video. If you are on the live stream right now, you can hop over to nightlightastrology.com and click on the 2024 Kickstarter link. I'm also going to put the link into the chat right here, so that you can also head over there if you want to. And hold on, let me just bring up a few things here. So when you contribute to the Kickstarter campaign, you're supporting a few things. A, you're supporting the channel and helping us meet our basic goal that keeps the lights on without us having to create any kind of paywall, subscription, all the stuff that content creators use as a means of creating revenue from the content that they create, which is how we earn our living. So it's important. And most content creators have ways of, making their work a part of how they earn a living. The philosophy of the Kickstarter is make everything completely free and accessible. And all of our programs, similarly, our study programs are very accessible in terms of the price points we offer, super flexible pricing for people who might be in more of a financial pinch. And we have need-based tuition. We have a lot of people who are on scholarships, all sorts of stuff. This all works because at the end of the year, we ask people, if you like this content, if you like keeping it free and accessible, if you like the philosophy of keeping accessibility and affordability around content and astrological education, then please consider donating and supporting not just me and my livelihood and my family, which is this is part of how I earn my living, but also a staff of 11 people that we have at Nightlight, whose livelihood also depends in large part on the success of the Kickstarter. If I don't have this staff of people in place, I can't do the work of 3 or 4 hours worth of content creating every day. What goes into my content creation every day is pretty simple, but it's each part is crucial. So, it begins with meditation and prayer. So there's some kind of spiritual centering that happens before I can sit down and be clear and sort of let go of personal stuff, so I can just focus on being as clear as I can in the delivery of whatever the content for the day is. And then it's writing and preparation. That can include reading and research. Usually I also spend time reading a few different sacred texts at different times. I'm reading different things and trying to familiarize myself with the sort of pantheon of world religions and philosophies and things that wise people from all walks of life, all places on the planet have had to say about living a life. And after that, I'll reflect on the astrology for the day. I'll often pull some cards or look what the I Ching has to say at the transits for the day. And then I write the content. And then I actually produce the content. And then after I produce the content, that whole process is generally about 3 hours. After that's all done, then sometimes it's longer, but then I'll ship it off to my production team, who then edits, revises, and distributes through all of our channels. And there's, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, the whole thing, right? And not only that, but then we have a team of people who are curating the comment section, because unfortunately in all of these different places, you get people saying some incredibly nasty things. So we have to have an eye on the comment section to make sure that people aren't getting harassed or that there aren't trolls sort of making the place inhospitable. So we always have our eye on that. We're curating the comment section for stories that we use in our storytelling episodes. We're interacting with the audience here or there as we can. And then we have a huge amount of emails that come in and a staff that has to handle them, because people ask a ton of questions and we try to answer every single email that we receive. So it's a huge effort, right? And we have to have that all in place to manage this, in addition to all of our programs and me also keeping a reading schedule. So in other words, when you support the channel, you're supporting an entire effort that's being made to make sure that this content comes out regularly. So there's a rhythm and a heartbeat behind this spiritually produced content, and that it's coming from a place of spiritual centeredness as it's created every single day. Not saying that I'm a sage or a saint or anything like that, but if I don't follow this process, the work is not nearly as good. So that's how we've been successful over these 10 years. As of this point in time, we still need the support, like I said, of quite a few backers. With just 5 days left, we need about 748 backers yet to come. But can we do that? Yes. I've seen sometimes in the last days of the Kickstarter, we get really big pushes. So I still believe we can get there. If you haven't pitched in already, please consider contributing and supporting the channel. We really do appreciate it. So on that note, I will direct one more time to the website, which is where you can find the link. That's the easiest place to go if you're on the live stream. Otherwise, you can find the link at the pinned to the top of the comment section or in the description of the video. You can pick up a variety of rewards when you pledge. There's a ton of different readings and classes and workshops that we offer recordings on from previous years. We also have class passes for all of our astrological study courses. So we have a first year, a second year, a third year program. Someone was just asking me if I could say something about the third year program, which they've heard about but can't find any information on. If you go to the website, nightlightastrology.com, and you click on courses, you'll see right there, it's the third year course. That starts in January. This is for people who have already at least begun the year one program. It is a course in the development of counseling skills and advanced mentoring in Hellenistic astrology. So we have lectures on counseling in astrology. We have live client readings, and we have live student-led practice sessions where students bring in charts that they're working on, and we work on those charts and the questions that people have about charts they're working on as a group. So you have to have at least been enrolled in the first year program or have significant background in Hellenistic astrology to jump into the third year program in January. But the other course in January that begins is our moon circle. So if you go to Roots and Spheres under the courses menu, you'll notice that our moon circle starts in January under right on the day of the new moon in Capricorn. I think it's January 11th is our first meeting. In the moon circle, we go over the astrology for the month ahead. We deliberately work ritualistically with plant medicines that are paired with each moon cycle on the year as a way of working with the energy of the moon cycle. And then we have various rituals and journaling prompts that we invite people to use throughout the month, paired with the astrology as well, which creates a more immersive way of working and embodying work with the astrology. So that's a very affordable course on sale through the Kickstarter. That starts in January. You guys might want to consider coming on board for that one. Or our class passes, 1 class, 2 class, 3 or 4 class passes. And those are going to save you 50 all the way up to 75% off when you bundle. So, and those don't expire. You could use 1 in 24, 2 in 25, however you want to. You could also gift one to a friend if you wanted to bring a friend along with you for an astrological course of learning. So, pick out a reward when you join the Kickstarter. We really appreciate it. And on that note, I am now going to shift gears to looking at the astrology of January. Let's see here. Yeah, let me go over here. Kayla says, oh, wonderful. Thank you for touching on that third year class. Yeah, you bet, for sure. All right. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull up the real-time clock, and we're going to take a look at the major astrological transits of January. Can you believe that it's already 2024? I feel like as I get older, years go by faster. And obviously, like, a year is a year, but it's amazing how age makes time feel so different. And maybe it's that I have kids too, and everything's just sort of a blur, but I don't know. I feel sometimes like time is moving faster as I age, and I'm sure that that's probably a perennial experience that happens for human beings. But it's just it's sort of hard to imagine that we're in a new year already, that we're there. it's a big year with some major events happening. The first of those major events that we're going to be looking at today in January is Pluto's re-entrance into Aquarius, which I started a series on this past month, and it was a 4-part series based on 2 different essays by James Hillman, the archetypal psychologist, who influenced a large number of the astrologers who are credited with starting the archetypal astrology movement, including Richard Tarnas, Liz Green, etc. So we're going to be looking at that in depth from a few more points of view as the month goes on and we get closer to Pluto's re-entrance into Aquarius. But if you haven't seen that series already, and today you're kind of like jonesing for more Pluto and Aquarius talk, then you might start by going and checking those out. If you also look at my community posts board, you'll notice a link to another astrologer's YouTube channel that I was on recently, Lori Lothian from Lunatic Astrology. She's a former Nightlight student and graduate from my programs. And I went on her YouTube channel to discuss Pluto into Aquarius. And that was a fun, lively conversation. We got into talking about AI and technology and medicine. And so, and she's more of a mundane astrologer than I am. And so it was fun for me to go on someone else's mundane channel, so to speak, and talk about things that I don't usually talk about on my channel. So that was kind of entertaining. You could find a link to any of those talks. If you look back at last week, the past couple of weeks, you'll find lots of info on Pluto and Aquarius there. But yeah, this is interesting. Someone said each year is a smaller percentage of your life. Fascinating. That's fascinating. Well, yeah. Orla says time is also actually moving progressively faster, proven by science. That's fascinating. Really like that. And Lana says, hey, Adam, watched you on Lori. Good episode. Yeah, I thought that was a really fun episode too. Anyway, I won't prattle on anymore. Let me get into January's astrology. I'm going to put the real-time clock up and let's take a look at what January has to offer. I think the biggest one is Pluto into Aquarius, as I just said, but there is a lot happening as soon as the month gets started. Now, I'm going to break these transits down one at a time, and I'll tell you that, generally speaking, I pay attention. Here's what I pay attention to: sextiles, trines, squares, oppositions, conjunctions. And I use the traditional 7 planets plus the nodes of the moon and the outer planets. Excuse me. Excuse me. So on that note, I'm going to look at those types of transits, because people are like, well, why didn't you mention the sesquiquadrate from Neptune to Black Moon Lilith? And I'm like, because I don't believe it exists. Just kidding. Okay, let's go. So on January 1st, Venus will square Saturn. And this is the first major astrological transit of January. It happens right away. We're like, no rest for the weary. Start January off with the Venus-Saturn square. Here's the thing about Venus and Saturn when they come together. You have 2 basic motifs for Venus-Saturn. One is the limitation, the death, the impermanence, the contractive qualities that Venus runs up against. But the other is a kind of transition from a less mature to a more mature Venus. So whatever that means, it could be in art, in love, in relationships, in friendships, in sexuality, anything that Venus covers as a symbol. Venus covers women, sisters, daughters, friendship, aesthetics, beauty, taste, sensuality, enjoyment, pleasure. When Venus runs up against Saturn, it's like Venus is hitting a moment of critical transition. So something will die. Something will reach its limit. Something will go through a period of being sort of contracted. But it's a creative passage. That's the thing to remember, is that Saturn is not just killing things for the spite of it. Saturn has been associated, for example, with the contractions of labor, which is ultimately, contractions are part of the creative birthing of a child. So when Venus hits Saturn, we use the word death and rebirth, of that phrase. We use it all the time. When Venus hits Saturn, Venus is going through a transformation, but it's going through one that involves facing limits, deterioration, death, and contraction. For some people, that could mean breaking up. For some people, that could mean the end of a friendship. For some people, that might mean a moment of a particular dynamic within a relationship no longer working or reaching a moment of like critical mass. It's like, okay, it's the ridge poles are sagging and they're going to break. On the other hand, when Venus hits Saturn, it's like that moment when, a wine uh, hits into its perfect period in which it should be drunk. It's like, okay, it's reached its vintage. Is that the appropriate way of saying it? I don't know. But it's like, okay, this particular type of wine, when it's aged like 13, 15 years, that's when it's perfect. And some it's like, oh, when it's 200 years old, then it's perfect or whatever. This is like Venus hitting a moment of maturity, so that the contractive nature of the encounter with Saturn brings out something really special and more mature, wise, and so forth. So so we're thinking about that at the very start of the month. The other thing to remember is that this is a Venus Saturn that is changing as Jupiter changes. So both planets, Venus and Saturn, are in Jupiter ruled signs, and Jupiter has just turned direct. So the Venus Saturn encounter may come through some kind of change of philosophy, principles, or values reflected by Jupiter's turning direct in Taurus. So you get this kind of contractive moment in relationships that is connected intimately to Jupiter's turning direct, and maybe some change of momentum or shift of values or principles or a philosophy change of some kind. That's a way of contextualizing the Venus-Saturn square. So that's our first major transit of the month. Let's go on. The other thing that happens on January 1st is, of course, Mercury's turning direct after being in retrograde and coming out now as the morning star. It's sort of bright and luminous. And Mercury turning direct is important because it begins a period in which the ideas that are reflected in the transformation of Mercury from evening to morning star now become sort of heralded or announced. They become embodied. They become the means by which we're individuating. Mercury as an evening star has so much to do with the socialization of our ideas, of our mind, our intellect, our perceptions, our cognition, our way of seeing and relating to the world through the mind. Now, when Mercury switches into the morning star position, it's gone through a death and rebirth of ideas, which is happening to us constantly. It doesn't have to be the world's biggest ideas. These are often quite subtle shifts in the nature of how we look at the world, how we communicate, the ideas by means of which we see and understand. Well, it's coming out as the morning star in Jupiter's sign as Jupiter's turning direct at the same time. Our ideas are changing, and they are the means by which we're ready to further individuate. The morning star position is more of a yang position. It's more about Mercury standing alone, standing apart, representing something in us that is individualizing. So you think of that as an interesting space in the backdrop of Venus's square to Saturn on the same day. Venus is going through a relational maturing process as Mercury is going through an individuating process, and both are related to Jupiter turning direct, reflecting a kind of philosophical change of orientation. And this might take a little while to integrate or express itself in our lives, but that's the process happening right on the new year. So it's really interesting because I could see this being like some pretty strong New Year's resolutions, but potentially that are taking root around this time. That'd be one way of looking at it. Anyway, on January 4th, the next interesting thing that happens is Mars enters Capricorn. Now, Mars in Capricorn is in the sign of its exaltation, and it's now configured to Jupiter in a whole sign trine and degree-based trine that it'll perfect later in the month of January. But this makes for a sort of mighty Mars. Mars is just starting to appear as a morning star as well. When it gets to about 15 degrees apart from the sun, you're going to see, like right about here, this is about midway through January on the 9th, that about 15 degrees of separation occurs, and you're going to start seeing Mars as the morning star. Mars exalted as a morning star is a very powerful Mars that is willing to look at the long-term trajectory, the long path forward, the long steady climb up the mountain, and it's willing to do the hard, gritty work of going somewhere that requires determination, steadfastness, discipline, and maturity. Now, this is a Mars that could also be sort of a little. There's a little masochistic sort of um, I don't know, like a machismo, you know. So you have to be careful with this Mars over the course of the month of January, that you're not, I don't know, going to extremes, pushing yourself too hard. Slow, steady, and strong is a very good description of Mars and Capricorn and why it's exalted there. So just kind of remember that, and remember that this is a Mars that is also representing a new something in our lives. Remember, as it appears as the morning star, just like Mercury appearing as the morning star, Mars is trying to bring forth a more individually, as like a self-actualized Mars that's trying to do new things on behalf of a stronger, more capable sense of selfhood. That's the morning star meaning for Mars, and especially when it's exalted. So anyway, it's a nice signature for Mars. Mars certainly has really nice dignity, and is far less you know, Mars in Sagittarius can be a little fanatical. It can be a little like, you know, a fiery prophet with a stick or something, like a thwacking people on the wrist if you don't agree. So I like Mars in Capricorn in terms of how productive it is and how nicely it is configured to Jupiter, who's just turned direct. Really feels like it's helping us turn the tide or shift the story somehow, according to a pretty big reorientation of ideas and values that's taking place. By the way, Monk of the West says, someone told me once each born date is an anniversary of your death. Blew my mind. Yeah, I love that. That's a really interesting quote. All right, so that's January 4th. Let me move on here. On the 8th, we get into Mercury's square to Neptune, which is happening one final time. And so we'll have, you know, all of the crazies will be out. I'm just playing. You know, obviously Mercury square to Neptune from Sag to Pisces can be sort of emotionally fanatical. The square can be, I mean, one thing that it can do is it can align our minds with things that are bigger than us, whether those are ideas or beliefs or understanding or not, or something that goes beyond our understanding, but we just have the dimmest awareness of it. Like those flickers you get, the light just blasts on temporarily while you're meditating, and you're like, whoa, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and you can't even remember what it was that came into your mind that was so, you know, powerful, so profound, and then it's gone again. Sometimes Mercury Neptune is just that reminder that we need, that, you know, we live in a magical universe that it constantly evades our understanding, that we're not here to know as much as we are to trust, that we're not here to understand as much as we are to flow along and keep our hearts open. At the same time, Mercury square to Neptune gives us these flashes of understanding that lead us to believe that even though it's bigger than we can comprehend, it is intelligible. There's something mysterious and unknowable, but profoundly intelligent at work. And we get little glimpses of that. I don't know, it keeps us going. So I love Mercury Neptune for that reason. Of course, Mercury Neptune can also be about very poor boundaries in speech or communication, mental and emotional health breakdowns due to grandiosity or illusion, or all, you know, all that kind of, this is sort of stereotypical Mercury Neptune stuff, but be careful of gossip and fuzzy thinking and blah, blah, blah. But I like this transit because it's gone back and forth multiple times now, once in forward direction, once in retrograde direction, now back in forward direction. So I feel like we have gotten to see what's real, and, you know, what is maybe like what is the grounded, mind-blowing truth versus what are those illusions that are you know, that overpromise and underdeliver, something like that. So anyway, Mercury square to Neptune, a powerful moment in the month that, you know, really is carrying us through the end of this lunar cycle, which began, if you remember, in December in Sagittarius, where we've had so much action between Sag and the late degrees of Sag, and Neptune in the late degrees of Pisces. It was a question of our beliefs being reoriented. And again, that's why it's been so important that Jupiter's turning direct. But now turning direct in an Earth sign, I think there's something about the shift of mind and perception, even if it's been emotionally charged at times, that is going to start leveling out, because Mercury is going to enter Capricorn not long after. It'll, you know, actually enters Capricorn here right around the 13th. Actually, it'll be the 14th of January. And then we have a very earthy Mercury that is connecting positively with Saturn, trining Jupiter, going into a conjunction with Mars, so nicely configured and really out of the territory of, the kind of the potential for like zealousness or, almost like emotional extremes that we've been seeing with Neptune and Mercury, which is also happening right now, by the way. We're getting that. If you look at the clock right now, you'll see that as we're speaking today, Mercury is going through the square to Neptune. So if you want to think about what we're saying with Mercury and Neptune today, it would also be appropriate. Okay, let's go forward. Another interesting transit that I really like in January is on the 9th. The sun goes through a trine to Uranus. And it's around this time that there's a few things going on, because we're just about at a new moon in Capricorn that we're going to talk about shortly, and then Mars will trine Jupiter. So we have this like powerful like 3-day period where the sun trines Uranus on the 9th. There's a new moon in Capricorn on the 11th, and on the 12th, Mars trines Jupiter. So this is a period of earthy acceleration. So it's interesting. You have to qualify what acceleration means when you put the word earthy behind it, right? It's like, what does that mean? Well, first of all, when the sun trines Uranus, they're connected very positively. So you have the idea of this moment of dawning awareness, a breakthrough insight, practical and transformative connection between the sun and Uranus is usually like illuminating, freeing, and in an earth sign, mobilizing, meaning it actually starts to change the forms and structures and practical details of things in the world. Whereas for fire, if they had a trine like this in fire, it would be much more of an emphasis on new ideas that have not yet the power to take shape, but are going to slowly descend down to earth and eventually take shape. That's fire. Once you're on the level of earth and you see a sun trine Uranus, you're talking about kind of liberating moments of breakthrough, understanding, shifts in momentum, and kind of like a raising of energy and action-oriented, practical, productive qualities. And they're very freeing and liberating with Uranus. So, the image that comes to my mind for an earth sign connecting in a trine like this would be, if you have a business, this would be like rolling out a new offering or service or product or something, and doing so very quickly and smoothly, and seeing it hit the ground running with like an effectiveness, and people are interested and excited in it. So there's just a feeling of something having quick and almost instantaneous manifestation ability on the earth plane. And that's a very powerful trine. It's followed, of course, by a new moon in Capricorn on the 11th. So we see this new moon in Capricorn coming through. And of course, Capricorn has tremendous productive power beneath it, right? And sometimes that productive power gets seen as sort of like ruthless and cold. And yeah, sure, some people will be using this as a way of like, of continuing to justify, an intense desire to get ahead, to be dominant, to succeed, because that's kind of one of the shadows of earth signs in general. But this is also like the Capricorn new moon with an exalted Mars that's co-present, a culminating Pluto. This suggests a tremendous mobilization of resources, effort, energy toward realizable goals, with the sun just coming off the trine to Uranus, that will help free us up and create more space for freedom and creativity, space for, space to feel like we're doing things that are not just productive, but that are exciting. That's one of the great qualities of Uranus, is that there's a lot of excitement when there's a Uranus transit, especially smooth ones. Like the squares, it's exciting but stressful, right? An opposition, exciting, but like a critical crisis that's exciting. When it's a trine, you kind of just get the feeling of excitation and also like a kind of smooth, harmonious productivity. So the new moon trining Uranus in Capricorn, both earth signs, really, really productive. And then what happens? On the 12th, then we get Mars in Capricorn, an exalted Mars appearing as the morning star. So very potent, sort of making its appearance. Something new is appearing, and it is very strong and productive and manifest power with the earth sign again. So you have, it can turn into actual results. It's not just intellectual changes or shifts in values or shifts in philosophies or even like like big emotional dynamics changing. This is stuff changing, right? And then, so Mars trines Jupiter on the 12th, and you get this Jupiter that's just turned direct and Mars trining it. I mean, if I were to use a gym analogy, because I've been doing a lot of work in the gym, that's kind of become a hobby of mine for self-care. And I'm not like a gym bro or anything, but I like to go to the gym and I like to work out. And it's helped me get in my body as someone who honestly has like, I've just, as a philosophical academic type, I've been really in my head. The past year has been so much about coming into my body. Jupiter's in my first house in Taurus right now, right? I had eclipses in the first house in Taurus, really helped me like get into my body more. It's one of the reasons I love doing it. If I were to use a gym analogy, this is like you're going up in the amount of weight that you could lift on a leg press, or on, maybe like your bench press or something. Like, oh my God, I got stronger. I have more capacity in me to do things that are difficult that I didn't have before. And you could use that analogy in any area of life, especially if the gym analogy like makes you want to vomit. I know some people are like, yuck, the gym. But so if you could think about it, like I have more capacity in me to do things that, I didn't have before. Maybe that means that you feel a little braver and more confident to go into certain social situations that were maybe more draining for you previously. Or maybe, you're making some positive changes in your lifestyle and therefore you have more energy. Whatever way you want to look at it, this is about the building and developing of resources that will have very immediate effect on actual physical things in the environment. So really positive series of earthy aspects right there. A couple of sextiles that are interesting. Next, we have a sun sextile to Neptune on the 15th of January. So you can see right here that the sun will sextile Neptune. It's a very brief transit. I find that sextiles are probably the most subtle aspects. And so I have a hard time telling everyone to get excited about them, because as someone who pays a lot of attention to transits, I find that sextiles they are so subtle that I often miss them. So just as a side note, anytime you're talking about sextiles, just keep that in mind, that sometimes they're not as loud. In transit, if you have a Neptune sextiling your Venus, you'll feel that like in your natal chart, but a mundane sextile passing in the sky, you may or may not notice it as much. Anyway, the sun's sextile to Neptune just pings back into some of those emotional and philosophical changes that were coming into this moon cycle from last moon cycle. So as we are by this time in January, we're in a new moon cycle that started in Capricorn. But remember, the previous one was in Sag with tons of squares from planets in late Sag to Neptune and Pisces. So this sort of brings just a little hint of that kind of emotional and philosophical shift that's been so apparent that we're in right now. That's really turning as we enter the new year. So a little ping of like emotional, philosophical, mystical, spiritual, imaginative qualities from the sun and Neptune, just kind of amplifying and illuminating those briefly. Doesn't last very long, but it's a nice little harmonious connection between the two. And then Mercury will sextile Saturn on the 18th. I like this because Mercury is in practical, ever sort of practical, hardworking, industrious Capricorn, but it too is just hitting a little ping to Saturn and Pisces, its host, where, there's just a little bit of emphasis here on the emotional, imaginative, philosophical, romantic. It just says like, okay, you do your thing, but don't lose track of the importance of this kind of emotional landscape of Pisces that's been so present in recent time. So there's two transits right there in the middle of the month that kind of bring echoes of the cycle we're finishing right now back into the next cycle. That's the way that I would look at it. And Mercury and Saturn connecting harmoniously is also, I would say in this case, practical, mature, reflective, structured, disciplined, but also kind of emotionally sophisticated with Saturn and Pisces. So it's a nice little connection there. Mercury will then trine Jupiter on the 19th. This one's a bit louder. Mercury's trine to Jupiter is something we've already experienced right when Jupiter was stationing and turning retrograde. The two connected. Then they connected again while Mercury was retrograde here in this month of December. Now they're connecting again in forward movement just after Jupiter's turn direct again here at the beginning of the month. So again, when you look at Mercury and Jupiter connecting, you're really talking about that kind of analytical, deconstructive, intelligent, philosophical mind of Mercury, paired with the sort of broader order, system building qualities of Jupiter. Really nice in Earth signs to have them connecting. It's like there are practical ways in which big shifts in ideas and values are being implemented this month, and you can see it time and time again between all these trines in Capricorn to Jupiter direct in Taurus. So now, this is where we get into probably the biggest astrology of the month. On the 20th, we have this very powerful transition. The Sun conjoins Pluto, and both of them enter into Aquarius. So it is a Sun conjunct Pluto moment as they both enter the sign of Aquarius. That's huge. On the same day, you get Pluto and Sun entering Aquarius as they conjoin. I mean, this will be one of the transits that I pay the most attention to on my channel this month. So if you tune in, you're going to find that we're having more conversation about Pluto into Aquarius from a brand new angle. We looked at a lot of the sort of the tendencies toward intellectual and physical dissociation that Aquarius can bring as a shadow of Pluto entering Aquarius. That was the point of that last series. But what we're going to do now is we're going to look at what are the most fantastic, amazing, mind-blowing, like positive things that Pluto and Aquarius can bring, because we've really looked at the shadow to start with. So this next series in January that I'm going to be doing is really going to be looking at the promise of the Sun or of Pluto entering Aquarius, which weirdly is like so strongly accented on this day when the Sun and Pluto conjoin, which quite frequently represents this very powerful moment of death and rebirth. And that is one of the only transits that I feel like I won't put a quarter into the quarter jar for saying, because when the Sun conjoins Pluto, there's tremendous examples of that just time and time again. Even more powerful, of course, if Pluto is conjoining, opposing, squaring your natal Sun. But when those two planets get together, especially as Pluto is actually transitioning into a new sign, there's this, that's going to be a moment where you are probably, I'd say there's a very high likelihood that we're going to see glowing examples of Pluto's transformation in the collective and in our lives, because it's being accented by a Sun conjunction. So that Sun conjunction is like the seeding of new ideas by means of which we follow or direct a life path. The Sun, just like it comes up in the day and it rises up and then it sets, is just like the character or story arc that you see drawn on the whiteboard in like my graduate programs in literature and creative writing. It's like, oh, here's the story arc and how a story arc generally works, rising of tension, and then a kind of resolution at the end and so forth. It's like, it looks just like the arc of the Sun. Not surprisingly, ancient astrologers looked at the Sun as the course of life, the course that life takes from birth to death, depicted as the rising, the culminating, and the setting. When the Sun conjoins Pluto, it is as though the arc that we're following is going to change in a really dramatic way. Now, all the more so if you have planets at the early degrees of fixed signs. But even just on a mundane level, that transit suggests that there is something shifting pretty significantly right around that time that we'll experience as a shift of orientation, that our life path can consider new ideas by means of which to direct our life course, like the ship is getting a new set of navigational coordinates. So we're going to talk about that a lot. Again, for some people, it'll hit a lot stronger depending on what house it's falling in your chart, or depending on what planets you have at the early degrees of fixed signs and so forth. Anyway, we go on to the full moon in Leo next. And let's see here. So the full moon in Leo will be on January 25th. And I'm going to, let me just highlight it right here. There it is. Full moon in Leo here is interesting because there's a T-square being drawn to Jupiter in Taurus. So it's a full moon that has this super powerful engagement with Jupiter and Taurus. And remember, that Jupiter is still in the very early moments of turning direct and starting to pick up momentum. It's only moved about a degree since turning direct. So I really can't overstate, like Jupiter turning direct is very important right now. Jupiter's turning direct. Look at that whole sign house of Taurus in your birth chart to get a feel for really where everything is changing directions. And from that point, this full moon will make a lot more sense. So like if I were doing a horoscope for, I don't know, for Taurus risings, I would look and say, okay, this full moon is shining a light on home, family, the foundation that props up your life, ancestral karma, et cetera, et cetera. But it's pinging off from a shift that has recently taken place in you, in your body, in your identity, in your sense of where your life is heading by virtue of how you're changing as a person, which has gone through some kind of reorientation as of late. And it's also intimately connected to the space of transformation indicated by the 10th house of your career, right? You see what I'm saying? So in horoscopes, for example, for January, Alex and I are looking at this full moon in those 3 houses in all 12 signs. So later this week, you'll get that before the start of the month so that you could see how I break that. What I just did, you can see how I break that down for all of the signs. That's going to be the best way to understand how this full moon is hitting because it's going to make it more personal. But broadly speaking, a full moon in Leo is suggesting that what makes you unique as a person is the path that you're on and the way it sets you apart from any and all other people. It is utterly individual. You walk it alone in a way. Of course, you always walk it with other people, but your path is your path. Just like, every acorn will sprout maybe into an oak tree, but no 2 oak trees are exactly the same either. You know what I mean? So the full moon is highlighting the tension between sort of paradigmatic or structural changes that you want to make that reflect where you align socially with larger groups or culture or beliefs or ideologies. That's the Aquarius shift. But you're also having to hold this opposite tension of what makes you profoundly unique and different and set apart from others. And this is pinging into Jupiter and Taurus that is suggesting that some of this has to do with a reorientation of those values that are most sensually and physically embodied. So there's this kind of like what makes me unique versus where do I belong socially, but it also relates back again and again and again to Jupiter and Taurus, Uranus and Taurus. How are you shifting your relationship to your sensual, physical, temporal human form, which is just as sacred? It's not like Aquarius doesn't get to, dominate it can't corner the market on importance. Oh, it's, life is only valuable insofar as you join the right causes and believe in the right things and vote for the right people and join the right groups and participate in the righteous religious affiliations or the right, most forward-thinking social agendas and blah, 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 blah. Yes, all of that is important. And there's going to be some big shifts in how you relate to that kind of larger social philosophical dimension of life. But you also have to hold that against the sense of what makes you utterly unique and different and special as an individual. And also, how do any of these things relate to whether or not you're actually in your body and you're comfortable with being a human just the way you are, So really interesting crossroads for the full moon in Leo. So anyway, we'll be talking more about that one for sure. And in the horoscopes again. Now on January 27th, Mercury will conjoin Mars in Capricorn. And it is doing so as we have this very powerful trine that comes in. And you'll see this right around the right from the 27th through about the 29th, you're in the 30th. So the very end of the month, those 2 planets can join in Cap, and they both trine Uranus. In Taurus. So here again, you have that quality of like, wow. I mean, it's like one of the pictures that comes to my mind was like when I was a kid, there was a period of time where I got really into Legos. Probably a lot of people have had a phase like this. I actually wasn't like I wasn't like a big Lego kid, but I went through a phase. I'll never forget, there was this huge like pirate ship. I mean, the thing was like massive. And I remember it took me, like this was a phase where my dad was like, "You're on your own." Like, I'm not building that with you. You build it. Follow the instructions. You're smart enough. And so I had to build that sucker, piece by piece, instruction by instruction, and it was just such a satisfying process. I'd come home from school, I'd keep working on it, and it seriously probably took me like a couple of weeks. So this reminds me of that. Like, that was the image that just flashed into my mind. It's like you're building something, and you will get it done. There's a lot of ingenuity and strength and fortitude and excitement to build something, to develop things, to work on earthy forms in the world. A lot of like can do. It's like you've got a bulldozer to work with this month, and if you need to move earth, like what better tool could you have? It's like you have a whole field you have to clear to build a garden. You just need to clear it. You'd rather have a bulldozer for a day than a shovel for a year. You know what I mean? Most of us probably feel that way. Anyway, not that I'm like a huge fan of bulldozers, but you get what I'm saying. So I guess the point is that there's this very practical energy here that can really help us move things. And it has this dramatic effect at different points in the month. We've seen it now again and again and again, these trines from Capricorn to Taurus. There's a nice productive sextile between Venus and Saturn that comes in, and then a Venus trine to Jupiter. This comes in right on the 28th here. So let me go back. So you see the 28th, Venus is going through sextile to Saturn on the 28th, and then a trine to Jupiter on the 29th. Or it's also on the 28th. So it's sextile Saturn and then Venus trines Jupiter, both on the 28th. Powerful positive connections in earthy signs again. Sort of, I like that it hits Saturn because there's something this month that keeps saying like, don't be so productive that you lose touch with this kind of more oceanic, watery, romantic, imaginative, sensitive qualities in Pisces. There's nice sextiles over and over again. And then on the 29th, Mars will trine Uranus, which I already mentioned in that previous series of trines from Mercury and Mars. So that rounds out the month. As you can see, there's some huge themes this month that kind of repeat over and over again. And I think we've done a nice job covering them, but it'll be interesting to see how they actually play out and to dig into the archetypes as the month goes on. One at a time, we'll pick those jewels up and turn and turn and turn so that we get a feel for all the different ways in which we might see them show up. When you do a video like this, essentially what you're doing is trying to tell the big story of the month. And then after you've tried to tell that story, you let it go and you start breaking down transits one at a time, because there's really there's no way of knowing if the story that you have in mind is going to be the one that plays out. So you keep that story in mind, you ping back to it a few times over, like through the moon cycle, but you keep open to the different and unique ways in which the archetypes might be presenting themselves. That's why it's so good for us to take some time. With all these transits, we'll be revisiting, especially the Pluto and Aquarius. But anyway, that is my talk for the day. So I am glad we're about an hour in, which is right where I hope to be. So I'm going to take a quick moment to refresh you all on the Kickstarter and where we are at in the Kickstarter right now. And then we'll open up for Q&A and live readings. Now, the Q&A that I am going to open up for today is sort of specific. I've done a lot of questions on astrology, right? I've taken tons of questions on astrology in these live streams this month of December. Today, I invite questions that will hopefully allow you to get to know me better as an astrologer and just a human being who creates content. So if you have any questions, like get to know you questions that you want to put into the Q&A, I'd be happy to take those. And I'll take a few of those, and then I will tell you how you can join me in the studio and I'll for a live reading, and I'll do a few live readings before we close. So any questions you have for me as an astrologer, a personal get to know you questions as an astrologer or as a person, keep them clean. That's all I ask. So before we do that, I want to remind you guys, oh, you know what? We've had a nice little bump in backers since we started this today. I really appreciate that. Really appreciate you guys showing up and doing some really nice contributions that we received since the start of this show today. We and actually I need to edit this. So backers that we have so far gained the support of as of right now, 1,037. So let me just do a little quick math here. So that means that we've gotten 8 backers since the beginning of this program today, which is huge. That's awesome. Thank you guys. We still need 740 backers by New Year's Eve. You can find the link to the Kickstarter if you're watching this after the live stream at the top of the comments section, pinned, or in the description of the video. Otherwise, go over to nightlightastrology.com, click on the 2024 Kickstarter tab, become one of our backers, help support the channel, the content, my staff, everything that we do. Keep this away from paywalls and subscriptions and all that stuff. Keep it free, easy, and accessible. And you're also, when you do so, you're contributing to all of our programs being easy and accessible for people of all income ranges. When the Kickstarter does well, it eliminates so many of the bottom lines that we might otherwise have as a business. And therefore, it allows the content to be really accessible for people that are coming from all walks of life. So no one's really priced out. And that is really fundamentally supported by the Kickstarter every year. So anyway, if you believe in good astrological education and you want to dive into some learning too, consider picking up one of our class passes. We've got great deals on all of our programs. They will only be on sale through New Year's Eve. So the ability to get that 50% off or 75% off won't be back again until another year from now. We ran a flash sale last year. I don't think we're going to run one in the year ahead. So just so you know, because sometimes people have emailed and said, if I can't do it right now, will you run a flash sale like you did last year? I honestly don't think we're going to. As of right now, we do not plan to. So these programs will not be on sale again until a year from now. So anyway, on that note, I'm going to shift over to the comments section and take some of your comments that you might have for me to get to know me as an astrologer and a content creator a little bit better. Any questions you guys have for me, I'll be glad to take. Who has influenced you most in your professional journey? Yeah, there's a few people, and the names of which you guys may not even know. I would say like Jeffrey Cornelius, Chris Magnus, and Chris Odell. There's a couple of Chris's in my life. These are just people who really instilled within me an understanding of astrology as a form of divination. And these people really deepened the spiritual connection that I had to astrology in the way that they taught me, especially horary, but also just astrological philosophy. Chris Odell was formerly an ayahuasca practitioner who studied and trained with the indigenous curanderos that I worked with in Peru. And he trained and studied with them for a long time and was also a veteran astrologer of 20, 30 years who also studied under Jeffrey Cornelius, who's a famous astrologer from the UK. And Jeffrey did a lot of like groundbreaking work academically and historically to argue that we should understand astrology as divination, and we should understand divination as different in its mode of knowing from empirical science. And so those people had the most impact on my life because they really helped me understand what I felt like I was doing philosophically, which is huge, because if you don't have philosophical clarity about what astrology is, where it's coming from, and why you're using it, you won't use it consistently, and there can be a lot of confusion and there can be very muddled results. Having a philosophical orientation doesn't mean that you know everything. It just means that you have ways of understanding what you're doing that you can go back to as, support, like a support structure or system beneath you that you can refer to. And that doesn't mean that you're not open to it changing, but it's a lot better than not having any at all and just sort of running around like you're in the Wild West, just shooting everywhere, So those people really helped me. Richard Tarnas and James Hillman, and studying all of James Hillman's work. I've literally read just about everything that he's ever written, including his biography, and went and listened to Richard Tarnas teach on the life and legacy of James Hillman in California for a full weekend one time, and James Hillman's wife was there, and I interviewed James Hillman's son for the Mountain Astrologer one time, and got to speak and ask questions to his wife. And like James Hillman has had such a huge impact on my life. Liz Green has had a big impact too in terms of the psychological astrology. Um, there's some of the shamanic practitioners that I worked with in the ayahuasca world have had a huge impact on me. A couple of yoga teachers that have been very, very important to me. Of course, my father, who is a Methodist minister and the earliest spiritual guide for my life, even though, you know, the Christian faith is not exactly what I align with now. My dad was pretty much a universalist. You know, he kind of came to Christianity as a hippie. There's a lot of people like that, actually. So yeah, so those are definitely some of the biggest mentors in my life for sure. What are your top astrology book recommendations for beginners? That's really hard because the way into astrology is philosophical and spiritual and technical. And sometimes it's not best to begin with technical astrology as you're getting into it. It's like people think that astrology is about performing calculations. And I think it's almost better to just be exposed to archetypes and archetypal combinations and learning archetypal combinations of planets. And starting to understand the world as moving according to an intelligence that speaks in patterns, symbols, myths, metaphors, allegories, legends, folk tales, fairy tales. That reality speaks through these things. I think for a lot of people, the way into astrology is not always. It's not always best to begin with like a textbook. You know, which is why I'm writing the book that I'm writing, which is really about the experience of divination. So everything I know philosophically about divination, like purposefully encoded or embedded into story form. Yeah, I don't know. But in terms of technical astrology, it also depends on what kind of astrology you want to learn. Like for Hellenistic astrology, you could go with like Ancient Astrology by Dimitri George or Hellenistic Astrology by Chris Brennan, or you could start learning astrology through the Astrology Podcast, which is some really nice resources for sort of like historical academic. It's almost like a kind of astrological journalism podcast. You could listen to a channel like mine and just be in the flow of learning about planets and archetypes and sort of saturate it that way. And I almost recommend those approaches more than just picking up a textbook, because a textbook starts teaching you technique. And I feel like most people need to have an emotional connection before they do that. Once you do that, and let's say you want to study Hellenistic or whatever, then the textbook would probably be, like Chris Brennan's book on Hellenistic astrology, Dimitri George's on ancient astrology would be good places to start. Let's see. Ani says, Adam is a direct source from Project Hindsight. You need to study with him. That's very nice of you. I'm really not. I've spent a lot of time, an extraordinary amount of time, in fact, listening to the lectures of Robert Schmidt, who was the chief translator at Project Hindsight. And he didn't live too far from me in Maryland, so I visited him a little bit before he died. And then I had a very bizarre way of like actually being present for his actual death, which was, very intense and life-changing. But I didn't know him super well. I was a huge fan, and I listened to like absolutely everything he did multiple times. Robert Schmidt would be another one to add to my list of influential figures for sure. And like checking out his work on the Project Hindsight Memorial website, where all of the audio is available. He and his wife have passed now. But yeah, I certainly pick up on the hermetic philosophical spirit of Project Hindsight for sure. Adam, what are your thoughts on composite or Davison charts? I don't use them. I don't like composite charts. I don't like synastry charts. I don't like midpoint charts. I don't like any of that stuff. I just put two charts down side by side, and I like to look at them and compare them and let a kind of dialogue emerge between the symbols and placements in the charts. Maybe a little bit of synastry, but yeah, that's I don't generally find it's like I'm always amazed when people are like, "Oh, I love doing synastry. I love doing composite." I'm like, "Have you ever just taken two charts and looked at them side by side and tried to delineate based on the comparisons of what's going on in each chart?" And people are like, "Why would you do that?" It's like, well, because the birth charts are more fundamental than a third chart that you're creating. And so, in my opinion, a artful comparison of two charts is always going to give you more than composite or synastry, in my humble opinion. That's just my humble opinion. You don't have to agree with me, but yeah. I've noticed for years the beautiful colored walls in your room, Adam. Who chooses the colors and paints them? I do. I choose them. And then honestly, like I suck at painting. So I have like hired, I mean, back in the day, I guess it was Craigslist, but now it's like Thumbtack. Like I hired someone to come in and actually paint this room because I didn't want to mess it up. So, cause I'm just not good at painting. Yeah. But yeah, I chose this color. I love purple. But last one was blue. And this one, I don't know, this room, I sit in it and I do prayer and meditation. And then I'm like, yeah, this is a purple room. I don't know why. Yeah. What would be the best place to start for a psychotherapist to understand archetypal astrology to better help clients? My honest answer is come study in our programs. That we have had so many psychotherapists that have come through our programs over the years. And what you really need is more than a book. You need a guided experience of the curriculum, the philosophy. You need to see someone who sees clients day in and day out doing readings so you can see what it actually looks like. That's all hugely important, especially for someone who plans to practice for other people. That would be my best advice is get in on our programs because it's the most practical way to entrain yourself to using astrology in a therapeutic setting. How do you personally process emotion? Oh, wow. Gosh, that's a big question. Well, I'm very emotional because I have Mercury in Cancer, and I have the Sun in Cancer. The Moon is in Capricorn in my chart, so there can be a way in which, like, sometimes I can definitely like easily just bypass emotions for the sake of like work, productivity, this kind of Capricorn stuff. But I'm very moody and very emotional. My wife and kids could tell you that I'm definitely like a moon creature. My wife is a Cancer rising, so we actually get along in that respect. Yeah, I don't know. I would say that I tend to process them in like where do I actually sit with them and feel them and work through them and like hear what they're saying and tend to them and myself. Because I think emotions are like living, and so forming a relationship with emotional currents for me is probably the mode of processing I identify with. I relate to my emotions. I listen to them mostly through prayer, meditation, journaling, exercise, going for walks, and then therapy. I see a therapist every single week. I work with a Jungian therapist, and yeah, I've done some hypnotherapy over the years. Of course, I've done a lot of work with psychedelics and entheogens and, yoga. There's lots of different ways in which to make sure that I'm like listening and tending and caring for what's coming up. The thing I have the hardest time with, and I'm sure maybe some people can relate with this, is like, do you ever feel like in a stressful situation, you avoid being like, wait, what am I feeling right now? Like it's important to actually check in and be like, how am I feeling? Do I actually want to go and do this thing that we're all supposed to do and no one wants to do? And I'm just thinking, well, we've got to do it. And like, maybe I should stop and be like, how do you feel? I think that's the hardest part for me is in the midst of like stretches of activities, or you feel like you're just on the conveyor belt of like life activities, to pause and be like, how am I feeling? And I'm getting better at that, mostly because my wife is really good at doing that. And so she kind of reminds me to do that. But yeah, that's my answer. That was a great question. Thanks. It was kind of fun to think about that. Let's see. What is your astrological journaling process? Do you do anything to keep it sustainable and not overwhelming with all the transits? Okay, so that's a great question, and here's the thing: is it's a little bit misleading. Like when I tell everyone, like journal, I keep a journal, blah blah blah. Here's what I do: I have either voice notes or like I'll jot notes to myself as reflections come up, and I send them to myself. That's my journaling process. It used to be more like I have this leather journal and a pen, and I've got like a cup of tea or whatever. Like I have kids now, I don't have time for that. Like there's not. I do have downtime and reflection time every day, but usually in that reflection space, I prefer to play music, meditate, pray, uh, do something physically embodied. I'm trying to work on that a lot. So I like to go running or walking or go to the gym or something because I need to get into my body more. Because then I have access to my feelings, by the way. So the journaling for me is more like, oh, insight. Oh, wow, connection. Oh, I see this thing. I write myself a note. And then when I'm planning or preparing uh, my content, I'll often pull from little observations or aha moments or stuff like that. So for me, the journaling has become a lot less formal, and it's very Mars. I have Mars and Gemini on my chart, so it's a little bit like Mars and Gemini, like, I guess. Could you tell about your relationship to I Ching? How long have you used it? Why do you like it? Do you use coins or sticks? Do you have a favorite hexagram? Nice. So I have used the I Ching since 2009. I began studying it and using it in 2009. So I guess that's 13, 14 years, something like that. 14 going on 15, I guess. Um, I use it. That is the oracle that I use most personally and most regularly for myself, even more than astrology. I like it in a way. Like I like astrology as a kind of map of timing, themes, and topics. Timing, themes, and topics. Nice. If I want specific sort of philosophical advice or insight for how to handle a situation from the highest, most mature, kind of best part of myself, and I'm feeling challenged, I turn to the I Ching. That is absolutely hands down. That's my go-to. Some people find the I Ching very overwhelming to study. There are many resources that can make it very, very simple. Online Clarity is a great community of people studying and working in their lives with the I Ching that's very friendly to beginners and has a very nice, accessible beginner's course that's pretty affordable. So Online Clarity, if you're interested in something like that. I use a computer generated, so like it casts it for you randomly line by line on an online site called ichingonline.net. But if I'm not doing that, then I use Yarrow stocks, which is always when I have something quite serious to ask, I'll sit down and use the Yarrow stocks, so. Leah, thank you to everyone who's donated and will do so. Nightlight Astrology is such a gift. I'm overflowing with gratitude for the opportunity to continue my studies with them. Thank you, Leah. We appreciate that. It's really nice of you. Okay, a couple people shouting us out here. Thank you so much. Ani says, if you are completely new, you'll still want to study with Adam all 3 years, but year 1 is the most comprehensive. Adam digs into other modes from his influences year 2 and 3. Yeah, right. That's true. Thank you. Oh, another one. The integrity, support, and knowledge of Adam and the Nightlight teachers is unmatched by any other classes I've taken. If you're on the fence about taking classes, I highly recommend it. Thank you. I thought you studied with Robert Schmidt directly. My bad. Well, I did, but I only, like, let's say a handful of times did I go over and sit with him in person, right? So it wasn't like he was my teacher or something. He was someone who kindly took time to help me understand a lot of things in a short amount of time, but not like compared to the people like Chris Brennan lived at Project Hindsight for a few years until they sort of parted ways. But yeah, there's I don't think, they're all just the influence of Project Hindsight on people like Demetra George, Austin Kappa, Chris Brennan, myself. So many astrologers came out of being inspired by Project Hindsight. So yeah. Although, everyone goes their own way too. Just like we hope people on our programs will do. Come take what we have to give and go fly. Go do your own thing, Yes, I did know him and learn from him before he passed. Adam, do you think science and spirituality will converge in the future? No, probably not. I mean, maybe in the far future. But here's the thing, is that until Okay, this is me on my soapbox here. Okay, so I'm just going to go for it. Until science looks at the universe instead of it being a machine that works according to like a series of operations, procedures, and causal mechanisms, and instead it looks at reality as a living being that is populated with beings, that is sentient, conscious, and primarily relational, which means that it's like there's a kind of freedom operating in reality between living beings in a living cosmos. And until we understand that that is fundamental and that you can only ever look at causal mechanistics as a byproduct of relationality in a living cosmos, then science and things like divination, or what is divination? It's a way. There are all these different languages like tarot, I Ching, astrology, in different places and times. There's astrology in the Mayan culture. It's in sub-Saharan Africa. Like it's everywhere. What are these people doing? What have we been doing with all of these modes of divination? They have been means by which to communicate with the living spirit of reality, or nature, or the gods, whatever you want to call them, archetypes, the intelligent, sentient presence of reality itself. And all divination has always been about connecting with that intelligence to predict, to describe, to instruct, to care for, to tend to shepherd our experiences, real experiences from free, participatory, living beings in a living matrix that is not bound fundamentally by rules, but that as a living being expresses rules, expresses order, expresses intelligence that can be understood on one level mechanistically, but is primarily living, free, unbound, participatory, and relational. Unless we experience it that way, unless we have a shift in understanding of what reality is, there's no way for the two to connect, right? It's like trying to tell someone, with two people falling in love, if you can't get into the space that poetry, art, philosophy, those spaces, literature, film, fiction, metaphor, uh, those spaces describe and reflect more accurately what the experience of being alive is than someone describing the chemical interactions that are a byproduct of that experience. So if we put the soul first, then the soul's reality, the living reality, prioritizes the experience of falling in love. Science can only describe the byproduct of falling in love, which is the causal dimension of it, right? So that's my point, is that like as soon as you like spirituality and science converge, a lot of the times what people are thinking is that we're going to come up with a spiritual causal explanation. And no, no, then they won't relate, right? Not until we stop putting the cart before the horse. Now that's my soapbox. So those are my beliefs speaking. Okay. Okay, let's see here. All right. Looks like Taco Fillings is ready to be a banned user. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. One more troll happily eliminated. I just don't have, you know what? It's like after a certain point, if someone starts becoming like really abusive with their language, in a stream or whatever, I'm like, you know what? I can tolerate people not agreeing because that's normal, but people being abusive and judgmental is just not cool. So, okay. Let's go on here. Scrolling down, such interesting You guys are nice. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's Mars and Mercury coming together in the sky right now, right? When people start lashing out or being abusive or whatever, it's like, you know what? If there's something, here's my philosophy when it comes to trolls. Let's have a like little segue and let's talk about trolls. I've learned a lot about trolls in the past year. While Mars was retrograde in Gemini, I went through a phase where I was like, you know what? I'm so sick of the because I mean, what you guys may not see it all the time, but like because we curate the posts pretty tightly, but there's probably 10 comments a week. I would say an average. Let's just say 10 comments a week, maybe 2 per post if we do 5 per week that are from people who are being verbally abusive. What people don't realize, not you guys, but the people who do those things, and I really don't think that they understand it, is that there are content creators are real people. You know, like just because you're sitting in front of an audience or you've developed a platform and there's an audience doesn't mean that those words can't really seriously hurt. And a content creator, just because they have a following or they have some kind of popular presence, does not make them invulnerable to feeling deeply hurt by rude or mean words. And people think that just because you're up there in front of people that they should feel entitled to saying things that they probably would never say face to face to another human being. And so while Mars was in Gemini last year doing its big retrograde, I went through a phase where I really like hit a breaking point within me. And I will tell you, I think my ego got my ego got really riled up. And I started being like, you know what? I'm going to fight back. I'm going to dish it back out to the trolls. And I had some fun with it for a while. But then after a while, it was like, because part of me is like, I don't know if it's the Minnesota culture, it's the Cancer or whatever, but I'm like, I'm a little bit more passive or maybe even passive aggressive at times, which is kind of Cancerian. So I was like, you know what, let those people do their things. But it got to a point where like, and I'm just being honest with you guys. I'm not asking for, pity or anything, because it's part of the job. There's lots of parts of people's jobs that are hard, right? And this is one of the things that's part of being a social media personality or whatever, is that people are shitty sometimes and you just have to deal with it. It got to the point where like I would say at least once a month, like an entire therapy session would be spent talking about some of the things that people were saying that like were seriously hurt, that were really damaging or mean. And I would be like, really having to work with it and so I reached this breaking point where I started like, I'm going to just give it back to them, and it only lasted so long before, I was like, okay, I got that out of my system. Like I've got it out of my system trying to like verbally spar with people. And now I feel like for the first time, I can truly sort of let it go and ignore it. Because before I was ignoring it on principle, but it hurt. And I was always underneath the surface, like really agitated by it. And then I went through this period of like sort of lashing out and trying to say things back to shitty, mean commenters. And then I was like, yeah, it doesn't feel right either. But it was nice to get that out of my system, And now I feel like I'm in a place where I can really just be like, I'm sorry that you have to be verbally abusive to someone that you don't know. That's just it's really too bad that you have to spend your time doing that. And I know that like there's a couple of podcasts I follow, right? And like especially in the world of sports, because that's kind of one of my hobbies. I follow like the Minnesota sports teams and stuff. There's some podcasts I listen to, and sometimes the commentators will say things that I really don't agree with, or I don't like their attitude, or whatever. Their ego bristles mine in the wrong way. And I start thinking about like some comment I could leave. And then I think to myself, how would I feel on my channel if someone left that comment, because I've been through it and I'm always like, nope, if I don't have something good to say, as my mama used to say, and all of our moms used to say, don't say anything at all. You know what I mean? Like if I can't say it in peace, if I can't say it constructively, like people who leave comments on the channel, they'll be like, hey, could you do this? It would be really nice if you added this or that. We take those comments very seriously. It's the people who are like really ruthless and abusive where it's like, nope, I don't tolerate it anymore. And I don't give too much to it. I just say, okay, you can't be on the channel. if you're going to say something that's delusional and mean and so on and so forth, then you can't be here. So anyway, that was a Mars return in Gemini while it was retrograde for me that I went through that kind of period. Anyway, in case anyone cares, but yeah, I think that there's it's nice. One of the reasons, by the way, people are like, one of the reasons that I like to take some time occasionally, once or twice a year, to do personal Q&A is because it's helpful when people think of you. Sometimes, not, I'm sure a lot of you don't, but when people think of an astrologer sitting on a YouTube channel talking, sometimes they project onto the astrologer some kind of, I don't know, guru, mentor, like wise man or woman, and you get those projections come on. And let me tell you, one thing I've learned is that while it's always nice to feel like your work is valued, and I so appreciate positive feedback, and of course, like my ego loves it too. Like, I'm not going to lie, but I have to be really careful now. I've also learned over time that the people who put you on the highest pedestal are often the ones who will most quickly want to knock you off there when you do something that doesn't fit with the projections that they've placed onto you. For example, there were people who were like, when I decided to leave the religious tradition I was a part of, that were like, "Oh, you suck," like you've lost your faith because your body's transforming and you left your religious movement, so you must not be spiritual anymore. Now you're a shallow person or something. I literally got probably 100 messages like that over the course of the first 6 months after leaving the religious tradition I was a part of and going through a physical transformation in my body. And all of those kinds of things. And then, of course, then so anyway, the point is, people see you kind of going through life on a channel like this when you're like a kind of an authority on astrology or whatever. And it's easy for people to project stuff. And then, it's like, one of the big things I've learned is like, I'm not responsible for other people's projections. I can just be myself and do the best that I can. Right. And it's also like a very normal part of being on a YouTube channel to deal with all of those things. And so you have to learn, you have to develop. It's like there's some kind of an initiation that you go through when you're any kind of a public figure, or probably even practitioners, therapists or social workers, or so many people deal with it. People will project something onto you because of the role you play. You just have to remember, I am not the role. I'm a person playing a role, And it's helpful if other people know that too, which is why I do the personal Q&As. Okay, well, anyway. All right, so shall we do some readings to close? I think we will. So here's what and I really appreciate all of your wonderful questions. These have been really fun. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. So if you would like to join me live in the studio, here's what I want you to do. Email us, grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. And when you email, include in the subject of the email your time, date, and location of birth. So grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. I'm going to put it up on the screen. Grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. If you want to join me live in the studio, I'm going to do 3 readings, and then we will call it a day. And so just email grabbed@nightlightastrology.com, put your name, your time, date, location of birth, and I will get you to come on with us. Let's see. Cassidy says, there's so many content creators out there that if you're not vibing with someone, you can easily find another creator. See, that's the thing too that's really interesting, is what I've learned is that some of the biggest trolls are hate watching. It's like, it's weird. It's like they watch all of the content and then constantly say negative things. I can't, it's hard for me to fathom that, because I'm like, gosh, if I don't like something, I just change the channel. I don't stay there and continually watch it and then attack it because I don't like it. It's like, why are you spending time doing something that you don't like? It's weird. Anyway, okay, enough on that. It's very Mercury square Neptune today too. This kind of like kind of surprise conversation about communication and boundaries, isn't it? Christiana says, I have been able in the last few years to look back on comments I've left and realize they were unnecessary. Now, before I hit send, I read it out loud to ensure it has a positive or neutral purpose. I think that's a great practice, honestly, because we get what we give too, you know, like I really believe that if we're in the habit of like harsh speech, we're going to probably experience harsh speech toward ourselves, either from others or from ourselves too. So I think we have to be really careful. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to go over to Grabbed and see if we have some people. Aha, yeah, we do. Uh-huh. Okay, I am going to. So what I'll do, by the way, I'm sending the link now to some people who have sent me emails. So, alrighty. So you'll get a link, and I'm gonna invite a bunch of people in. I'm only gonna do 3 readings, so don't be upset if you come in and I don't get to you, because I'm gonna send it to a bunch of people because sometimes people don't respond. Alrighty. All right. So you'll get a link from me and just click on join when the link comes in the email. Do. All righty. Okay, I've got some people joining in the green room right now, so that's great. We'll get started here in just a minute. Okay. Almost ready here. Give me just a second. And make sure that you have your audio and video on when you enter so that I can make sure I see you. I'm going to go ahead and welcome Megan. How's it going? Can you hear me okay?
Yes. I just had to turn off the YouTube in the background because it had an echo, but I think we're good now.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to put your birth data up on the screen. I think you were the very first one in.
Cool.
So, what is your date of birth?
1/27/1992.
Time.
8:48 p.m.
And location.
Nashville, Tennessee.
All righty. So I just want to make sure that I've got your chart correctly configured here. I have a Virgo rising. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay, great. I am going to put this up on the screen. Crystalline Alchemist, what was your email address? You have been trying to get on a number of times, and I've missed you. So I want to try to get you on this time because you've been on a bunch of live streams, and I feel like I always end up missing you. So just tell me, what is your name so I can, or your email or whatever, so I can see it in the list, and I'll send you the link. Okay. I'm going to put your chart up on the screen. Okay, tell me if you can see it and if that looks right. Oh, I actually spelled your name wrong. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You know what?
Yeah, that looks correct though.
Hold on, let me just, I feel bad. We're gonna spell your name correctly. Okay, there we go. Okay. All right, now I'm gonna do it. Okie dokie. And give me just 1 second. Oh gosh. Okay. I'm trying to get my pen to work. Give me just a second.
Yeah, you're good.
All right. And then one more thing here. Let's see. All right. We've got all of these. So we've got a whole bunch of people, and I could not find your email to Crystalline Alchemist. And I know you've tried to come on a bunch before, but I couldn't find it. So my apologies. If you want to try to email again, you could do so, but I'm going to get going now. I didn't see the email address that you mentioned, so I'll just keep it going. All right. So we're going to take a look at the biggest transit of the year ahead and try to get a feel for, what's showing up in terms of the transits of 2024. The one that jumps out to me right away, Megan, is Uranus opposing your moon.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Pluto's entering Aquarius where your sun and Saturn are located, and that can be a significant transit, but it's a ways away yet, right? So, in terms of, I would probably look a couple years from now before Pluto and the sun is sort of really making sense. But Uranus opposite the moon is the biggest transit of the next year that'll be hitting over and over and over again. That'll actually last even into 2025 a bit in terms of using like a 3-degree orb. Uranus opposite the moon, when you have a moon-Pluto conjunction, first of all, like one of the things I would say is that there can be a really intense activation of the karma around the relationship with your mother. Mm-hmm. Like a serious disturbance, breaking up of and transformation of the structures of or habits, behaviors that you picked up consciously or unconsciously from your mother, for good or bad. It can be about the actual relationship with mom going through a change. It can be about the topic of motherhood. For example, sometimes, like Uranus opposite the moon comes about when your life completely transforms because you become a mom, right? Or sometimes the connection to mother is also the connection to home, and where we find a sense of rest and support and security. So sometimes, of course, people move, they relocate. They may go through a shift of like their emotional base, right? And that can translate practically into moving. Before I go any further, do any of those themes immediately hit as, I don't know, things you can almost see already on the horizon?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Most of those, honestly.
Any in particular that are really strong? Like, how's things going with your mom, if you're comfortable saying even just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I've been in, so we were talking about therapy earlier. I've been in therapy for a while, and this concept actually, I'm getting ready to go back to Nashville to visit my family for New Year's and for a couple weeks afterwards. And I just had a conversation with my therapist about how I feel like the dynamic with my mom is about to change because she's also started therapy. And so I feel like we're reaching this point where a conversation is going to need to be had about some things from when I grew up. Nothing, bad. It's just a change in the relationship in general.
Yeah, so definitely the potential for some breakthroughs. Yeah, that's huge. The other thing would be the topic of siblings or family members. In the third house, sometimes the moon will extend to cousins, sisters, brothers, and significant changes happening in their lives that really redirect the entire constellation of family karma. When a brother or sister gets married or has kids or um, moves to another country or something, there can be life changes reflected by that opposition that will express themselves through your family of origin. That's the basic idea.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, though, would be that the moon Pluto in the third house can reflect something about your mindset, mental and emotional patterns, the way you see, think, feel, relate to like everyday events in your environment. Do you tend to be a person who catastrophizes? It's very moon Pluto to do so. Or do you tend to be a person who has trouble opening up or being vulnerable or trouble with trust, or does everything they can to keep a sort of secure perimeter, emotionally fortified? Sometimes Uranus opposing will help people to loosen up, be less afraid, a little bit more vulnerable, more carefree, a little easier. The Taurus axis, of course, is all about that sensual feeling of stability. Whereas Scorpio is a bit more like feeling like you've got a good antivirus for your computer to protect it from hackers. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I wonder about how, just could there be some way in which the mental emotional dynamics of your life are ready to be expressed differently, or to open, or to shift from something scorpionic to some different understanding? Sometimes that also happens by means of spiritual topics or things we're learning or studying, or ways in which our beliefs are shifting with Uranus in the ninth.
Yeah, all of that actually really resonates because after going into 2024, one of my intentions, I guess, that I have set for myself is to open up more. And you talking about being on social media, that's something I want to do more of. And I'm also an entrepreneur. I want to put myself out there more. And so that's requiring me to dig a little bit deeper within myself and kind of let go of some of those fears around that.
Okay. Yeah. That is that's right on track for Uranus opposite. Now, the final thing that can happen, of course, Pluto, or the moon and Pluto together, can speak to moments of very deep emotional turmoil or crisis, when health things happen, when relationships are disturbed, when family drama emerges, when emotional security is disturbed. It can represent a kind of paradigm change, or there can be a significant revolution in your life because of the way in which you have to handle an unsettling or chaotic period, or little periods that come up when Uranus opposes the moon. Again, like, one of the things that many people experience when Uranus is opposite the moon, and at least women, is like, I'm pregnant, I've become a mother, my entire reality is being disturbed, and there's an awakening to a new part of yourself, to a new phase of life, and you're free in some ways from a lot of things in the past, even as you're simultaneously handling the stress of new things. So that, like, Uranus moon is often associated with the strange transition of life into motherhood or marriage, or any other phase of life that is like taking the plant out of one container and putting it into a different container.
Yeah, that makes sense. And my husband and I are looking at having kids in the near future, so that makes sense.
There we go. Yeah, I kind of had a feeling with that one.
Yeah.
Anyway, Megan, thank you so much for coming on. I hope this was useful for you, and I hope you have a really great 2024.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, take it easy. Bye. And so we will continue on now. And I don't know if the woman who was trying to get on saw my message or not, but I could not find your email. I'm really sorry. I could not. Well, I don't think I knew what the name of your email was. I didn't see anyone named Crystal in the thing. So, but that's okay. We have lots of people in here, and I'd like to get to some of them next. So let's see what we can do. Angela, how's it going?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for coming on. Are you ready for me to do a little reading for you?
I am ready.
Awesome. Okay, let's see here. Angela, could you tell me your date of birth?
I'm 2/26/87.
Okay. February 26th, 1987. Did I hear that right?
Correct.
Okay. What is the time you were born?
It's 5:54 a.m.
And the place?
Saginaw, Michigan.
All right. I went to Central for my master's degree. So I was there was a lot of people I met who were like from different parts of Michigan. Met some people from Saginaw.
Nice. I'm a Spartan. So
Okay. Fair enough. All right, let me just make sure I've got Aquarius rising. Does that sound right?
That's right.
All right. Put this up on the screen. Got some people representing Saginaw. I did go over to, I had some friends that went to state, and I would go over there occasionally to like hang out with them and stuff.
Good times.
Yep. Okay, let's see here. So what are we looking at? All right. Oh, okay. Yeah, you've got Pluto coming into your first house, and not this year, but next year it'll go over the ascendant. But it's close enough this year. It gets 2 degrees.
Yeah.
I would look at that as probably the most significant transit coming up. It's certainly the one forming in the next 2 years that's the biggest. But even this year, with it 2 degrees off the ascendant entering the first house, you're going to feel the changes coming really imminently. The best way that I know how to describe Pluto entering the first house, I'm going to tell you a story. All right. So I had so there was this period of time when I was going through a Pluto moon transit. You also have the moon in your first house. And we had, right the day before my dad came to visit me and my wife, and we were engaged and we were planning our wedding. So it was like a couple months before our wedding. He comes over, and right before he came, there was this weird smell coming from behind the refrigerator. It was like, and we couldn't identify what it was. We were sniffing around the inside of the refrigerator like nothing. And then my dad arrives. During his visit, the very first night, we took him to a play in DC, because we were living in DC. And the play was called Pluto. And I thought this would be fun to go see a play about the mythology of Pluto, set in modern day, while Pluto's on my moon and my dad's visiting, right? Like, I was an astrologer, so I was thinking this is real clever. This will be fun. Anyway, in the play, the god Pluto keeps crawling out of the refrigerator into the kitchen of this family to work an influence on a family who's going through this total destruction. Like, they're just completely falling apart in like modern American ways, you know? And Pluto keeps crawling out of the refrigerator. And I was like, oh my God, there's something like, oh my God, right? What a synchronicity. While my father was visiting, we found out that he and my mom were going to get a divorce. And so he dropped the news on us while he was there, that like another day or two later, after things were just getting weirder and weirder. And I was like, he's holding something. So anyway, he shares with us that they're getting divorced. And then we discovered, after the day after my dad left, that a sewage pipe had broken that was running through the wall behind the refrigerator. And we had to gut the wall out to fix this pipe. And I'll never forget being like, okay, that's Pluto. Like, there's Pluto. Pluto is putting me in touch with the stinky stuff below the surface. And Pluto's job is, it's been there. And if it keeps doing its thing behind the surface, it's going to wreck the whole house, right? It's going to create a massive disaster. But you'll start getting clues. Pluto starts coming out of the refrigerator, so to speak. And Pluto will start saying, like, I'm here and I want you to look at the shit, look at the stinky stuff. And you need to take a close look at it. And it will probably mean that there's a death of some kind. There's something that needs to be removed, or like a pipe that needs to be fixed, and like stinky stuff that needs to be cleaned. And, there's a death. But once you do that work, there's so much change. I will say that even though I wish my family was all still together, as many people listening probably have broken families too, and you wish your family had stayed together. But one thing that I learned from that experience was that, death is just a part of life. Sometimes the trash gets taken out and things end. And if you trust that process, there's a way in which the trust will allow you, it gives you eyes to see the things that are coming because the trash got taken out. My mom, much happier, had a revolution in her health after the marriage ended. My dad, for a period of time, happier, right? I mean, like, and even though I mourned and like that was really hard, there was such a tremendous power of rebirth that helped me think about, how do I want to be a dad and a married man? Because I was getting married a couple months later, So what Pluto does when it comes into the first house is it's been in Capricorn for like 15 years plus, in your 12th. And there's been stuff collecting in pipes where you can't see. Because that's the 12th house was called our blind spot by ancient astrologers. It's like a place that you don't have clear access to. And now it comes into the first house and it's going to start showing you, okay, here's what's been beneath the surface. Here's there's some pipes leaking here or there, whatever. It could be with respect to any area of your life whatsoever, because the first house is so personal. It could be about work. It could be about kids. It could be about marriage. It could be about health. It could be about money, whatever. People always think, well, if it goes into the first house, it's going to work on my identity. Yeah, but how does it do so? It does so by the fact that your identity is changing because other areas in your life are changing, right? And so when it goes into your first house, it's like saying whatever crap is coming up, the most fundamental thing that's being asked of you is that you become someone fundamentally different than who you've been. At a level of identity, psychology, personality, style, health, appearance, it's the most personal house of the chart. And the stuff that's coming up will be the stuff that says, you got to think of a new way of being you. And you're going to recreate yourself fully, especially the more courage you bring to dealing with the stuff that's coming up for you to look at. If you've been dissociated from your body, it'll say, get into your body. If you've been in a state of neglecting or denying yourself through your relationships, it'll say, no more of that. There's too much crap to ignore anymore. If you're being abused in the workplace, it'll empower you to say no more. It's like that. If there's, it could be also like it's going to be tapping into Mars in your fourth house in Taurus. Could it be helping you transform as you look at patterns of power in family, in home? Maybe there's ancestral karma that's coming up too. But the point is that whatever's coming up, the fundamental way you'll experience it will be as an opportunity to recreate how you think of yourself and how you act and behave in the world. You can become a new person.
Wow. So keep that therapist on retainer, huh?
Yeah, that's right. I love that.
Gonna need
it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, the other thing I would just say is that, for Aquarius rising, it's really important there's two levels that I would always say for Aquarians. Like the first level is the ideas that connect you to other human beings are really important. Whether those are religious or political or whatever, it's like or cultural, you know, like the ideas that mean a lot to you are going to connect you with the right kind of people. So this could be a time to review who you are in relation to the ideas that you feel most connected to other people by means of. You know, like who are the right people to be around in my life is a big part of my identity as an Aquarius. But the second part is also the challenge that Aquarians will face with Pluto in the first house of becoming more embodied physically. You know, it's like it's easy for Aquarians to live on these, like, in the clouds, these big, huge intellectual spaces that Aquarians are very comfortable moving around in. But it's like, yeah, make sure that this Pluto and Aquarius, and Pluto's very rich. You know, it's like Hades and Pluto are about like the like muddy soil that makes a garden grow, you know? So there's also something maybe about, like, if you have trouble staying in your body, your emotions, your heart, your physical health, anything like that, Pluto and Aquarius will also help you recognize to whatever extent you might tend to dissociate, you know? So just keep those two things in mind, I think.
All right. Sounds great.
Yeah. Angela, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Hope this was helpful for you.
Thank you. Yes, it was. Thank you.
All right. Take it easy.
You too.
Bye. Oh, I like this comment. Shelley says, I had Pluto over my ascendant 20 years ago. It is a death and rebirth of identity, for sure, right? It's really interesting to. So my dad doesn't know anything about astrology. And by the way, he had Pluto. He's a Capricorn rising. He had Pluto coming over his ascendant when he was going through the divorce, and he didn't know anything about it. And he said to me, Adam, I had this dream. In the dream, it was like some post-apocalyptic future. It was all industrial and really heavy and like gross. And I was a slave for a corporation called Corporation. The corporation was called Pluto. And he said, does that mean anything astrologically? And I happened to know that Pluto was right on his ascendant by degree at that point. And I was like, oh, Dad, like, let me tell you about the Pluto transit you've got going on right now. So I explained it to him. And you know, my dad has a doctorate in Jungian studies. He's a very smart guy. And he really appreciated hearing about that Pluto transit, you know, for the same reason. It's really powerful to connect archetypes to our experiences, isn't it? It's just amazing. Anyway, so the next person that came on in order that I saw today was Kenna. So I'm going to welcome you on, Kenna. How's it going?
Good, thank you.
Are you in a sauna?
I'm sitting in my sauna.
Amazing. I love that this is like, yeah, this is a sauna moment. That's great. Well, we'll try to give you.
I was hoping you wouldn't notice.
Well, this is like a spa day. You get like a reading in your sauna, the whole thing.
It's beautiful.
All right, Kenna. Could you please tell me your date of birth?
January 20, 1958.
1968, did you say?
58.
58. Okay, there we go. And the time?
4:53.
AM or PM?
PM, sorry.
After the carbs and sugar yesterday, a lot of us had, we could probably all use a sauna. Sweat it all out.
Exactly my motivation.
What city and state were you born in?
Denver, Colorado.
Denver, Colorado. All right. This will be my last reading for the day, and then I'm going to sign off. I have you as Cancer rising. Does that sound right?
That's right.
A Cancer rising caring for herself in a sauna. Does that feel right to everyone? Feels about right. I'm always amazed at how the rising sign pops up, and like something in the background of the person I'm talking to will be so reflective. like I've sat down, you know, and like how many Leo risings, when they sit down, they've just got like a full mane of hair, you know, or something. Anyway, I think this is appropriate. So Cancer rising, let's take oh my gosh, come on now. You got the easiest one of the day. You've got Pluto coming over your sun on your solar return, by the way. Holy cow. Kenna, yes. This is going to be a big year, a really big year for you. You've also got it squaring, Pluto will square Jupiter at the same time. Got a Jupiter Sun conjunct or a square right there. Holy buckets. That's a big deal. Okay, so first thing I have to ask, just to like get it out of the way, when you see the sun, it rules the second, it's in the 8th. Is there any kind of, like, sometimes you see this Pluto on the sun in the 8th when your spouse is going to retire, or you're going to retire, or something's going to change fundamentally around money and assets in your marriage or something like that, that would be like a super like low hanging fruit to look at right away. Is there any kind of significant shift in terms of like money or business or your occupations between you or a loved one that is going to happen?
Not currently. Had big shifts a few years ago.
Okay.
Big shifts, yeah.
I mean,
my husband died tragically. I, completely picked up and left and moved to a new place. My whole identity is changing. So,
oh my God.
I'm
I'm sorry, can I keep going?
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, when did he pass?
March 31st of 2021.
Okay, so just a couple of years ago. Wow.
I'm sorry, May 31st of 2021.
Okay.
That was a Memorial Day.
My gosh, yeah, that's huge. That's such a big transit, and that was a big event. And I'm sure that probably there would have been. I'm thinking maybe even Pluto was probably hovering.
Saturn and Pluto were probably close. Yeah.
I was going to say Saturn and Pluto in your 7th house, right? Like,
right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then they both go into your 8th too. Gosh, yeah. So you've been like, well, what's interesting, if we put it into that context, to me, things get significantly more hopeful because you've already been through such a collapse, a kind of Saturn-Pluto dynamic in the house of marriage. I wonder if there isn't some, I've said this earlier where I talked about the sun as the arc of your life, like the story arc. And if you think about that arc as like the acorn moving into an oak tree, or the ambitions that shape and guide our life, Pluto on the sun, one of the most fundamental things that it'll do, and it's on your solar return too, which means it's a massive year for you in the biography of your life. It could indicate, for example, that there's going to be some kind of new activity or activities that you engage in that become, a real deep source of interest or investment for you. Sometimes that means people are going to do that. They're going to, I would see it as, I would almost wonder if it wasn't collaborative, if it didn't involve other people, because of the Moon Venus signature in the same house. It just looks very like joining with other people. Oh, we lost Kenna. Let's see if we get her back. Maybe she's going to come back. Well, I'll just say this for Kenna as I try to wrap this up here in case she doesn't come back, and then hopefully she can catch this on the replay. When Pluto goes over the sun, one of the big things that changes is what gives our life a sense of purpose and meaning. So like people, when Pluto hits the sun, people often reorient their careers. They meet or get married, they get divorced. We're talking about major biographical milestones that shift our sense of what we're here to do, what we're here to become, what gives us meaning, what grants us purpose. And there's a story of death and rebirth that's happening around the narrative arc of our life. When Pluto hits the sun, catastrophes can happen that fundamentally rewire a person's sense of what they're here to do with the rest of their life. And catastrophes could be like losing a husband, or the death of someone, or a health crisis, or a major fallout at work with your boss or something. They're usually not little. You know what I mean? And they don't have to be catastrophes either. There can be moments of becoming greatly empowered by someone or something, but that empowerment it's so charged. There's so much energy in it that there will be some way in which it forces a kind of deconstruction or leveling of the ground to start anew. When Pluto goes over the sun, people might be really excited to start a new career, for example, but they may have to make significant life changes in order to facilitate that change of career that constitute a kind of death and rebirth. Kenna, I'm just hoping that
I'm back.
You didn't.
My phone heated up.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, you know what? I think she might have, her phone might have burned up. That's what I was worried about.
It didn't burn up, but it said get out of the sauna. So, and I had to cool it down. So I've got a cold towel on my phone, and I'm so sorry.
Oh, don't even worry about it. You can listen back to the recording to hear what I said, because I just kind of kept going and said, hopefully she can listen to the replay. Yeah. But the main thing I said is that, Pluto on the sun will be fundamentally about reshaping the sense of life purpose. At this stage in life, like let's just call it, if you're past your second Saturn return, then it's the final act. What am I doing with the final act? What's left to accomplish? What goals do I have? What unfinished business do I have? And Pluto is going to empower you to really look at those things and clearly define them. It may also involve you with other people because of the 8th house theme, or it may have to do with separating yourself from the cares, thoughts, values, judgments, opinions of other people, which can be a big process with Pluto in the 8th house. But I think with Moon and Venus there's also the room for some meaningful collaborations that could come about with people, groups of people, communities of people, which the Moon and Venus really appreciate, and Aquarius is also prone to. So that's what I would look at here. With Jupiter in Scorpio also ruling your 9th house, I wonder if some of it might be creative and sort of maybe somewhat spiritual. Jupiter in the 5th ruling the 9th house of Pisces. It feels like Pluto could be activating some kind of creative and spiritual dimensions of your life, and maybe communities that lean in that direction as well. But massive change this year and next year, 2024 and 5, as Pluto just keeps going back and forth real close to that degree. That's what I would look for, Kenna. And then, like I'd say, just listen back to some of what I said after you left, once the replay's posted, and you'll hear the rest of what I said.
Yeah, well, that very much resonates with me. I've spent my life running my life based on other people's validation and opinions and what they think. And that has been a 180-degree process of a more internal compass instead of an external one, and finding spirituality and having that freedom as a autonomous person for the first time in my life, really.
Yeah, I mean, it is really a new chapter, and I can't help but wonder if you're moving also from a stage of kind of the wake of the flood, to
Yes.
the water pulling back, and like, what am I going to build now with this new phase of my life? Maybe more clearly articulating itself.
Yeah, I'm hoping for some clarity in this year. I know I'm on the verge of that, but I don't know where I'm going.
Well, Kenna, I hope and pray that it's a great year for you. And I just really want to thank you for coming on and letting everyone learn through your chart, through your experiences. When people come on and share stories and we get to see astrology played out in like real time with real people, I think that's when, for many people, the most profound insights come as like students and consumers of astrology. So thank you for making yourself available.
Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful few hours.
Well, have a great rest of your day. Hopefully you get to enjoy that sauna, sweat out whatever you need to.
I will. Thanks so
All right.
much.
Talk to you later. Bye. Okay. Well, you know what? It's been a nice day of sharing. I really appreciate all of you guys. There are some people like Alessandra. I've seen you here now twice and I haven't gotten to you. So next time, come back on and I'll get to you. Okay. And Brittany, you too. And thank you guys so much for coming out. We'll be back for some more live streams this week. Don't forget to check out today's full moon in Cancer video. That was a good one that I think there's a lot of value in looking at that video today to get more insight from the full moon in Cancer that we're experiencing today. So on that note, I will leave us, and don't forget to go over to the Kickstarter if you haven't already. We're trying to get to 1,777 backers by New Year's Eve. You can find the link pinned to the top of the comment section or in the description of this video. We need a big push here in the last days to get there. Hope that you guys will consider coming and studying with us, picking up any of our rewards that we have as little thank you gifts for your contribution. And we will see you again tomorrow. Bye, everyone.